of the hour, and as we come on the air, the latest brutal fighting happening right now within Gaza City. New pictures coming into us showing how intense the war between Israel and Hamas has become. What we know about how one of the biggest hospitals in the region was hit by strikes today. We are live on the ground. And we are back in countdown mode yet again to another complete government shutdown. What lawmakers are trying to do to avoid that, or are they? How you could be affected if it doesn't work out. Plus, the son of a former top Hollywood agent under arrest, suspected of murder. What we know about how police are making the connection between him and a woman's torso found in a dumpster. Then the Big Ten has just announced it is sidelining Michigan's head coach from the upcoming games over that sign-stealing scandal involving the university's highly ranked football team. Why that alleged scheme may have given the team an unfair advantage, and what happens ahead of tomorrow's big game. Plus, women are, of course, dominating the 2024 Grammy nominations. Did your favorites make the list? Oh, I'm sure they did. We'll let you know in a minute. Good day. I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie Jackson. We start with the latest intense fighting right now inside Gaza City. Israeli forces pushing deeper into the densely populated area. Take a look at the latest images. Fierce aerial fighting and flares on the Israeli-Gaza border in just the last couple of hours. Palestinians in Gaza City now really ringing the alarm, saying that Israel is launching airstrikes near many hospitals, including at the largest in the region where some strikes hit earlier today. Tens of thousands of people are sheltering inside the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City, that from the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. What exactly happened or who is responsible for these strikes you're seeing right there isn't really clear right now. Israel says it did not target the hospital. The IDF says the strike resulted from a projectile launched by the militant group inside Gaza, and that Israel says it was, in fact, a Gaza-fired misfire from the Palestinians. The Palestinian General Secretary is accusing Israel of bombing northern Gaza indiscriminately. All of this as the United States says far too many Palestinian civilians have been caught in the crossfire and, in fact, are being killed. All as Israel retaliates for that terror attack by Hamas back on October 7th, in which hundreds of people were murdered in Israel, more than 200 kidnapped and held hostage. Still, here's Anthony Blinken today, the Secretary of State.
Far too many have suffered these past weeks. There is more that can and should be done to minimize harm to Palestinian civilians.
Well, just now, the health ministry inside Gaza says more than 1,800 people are believed to be dead. 10,800 in Gaza, 1,400 there you see in Israel. NBC's Erin McLaughlin is in Jerusalem. She starts us off now. Keir Simmons on the ground in Tel Aviv. We're going to start with Keir, actually, for the latest. And Keir, we've been talking about this push into Gaza City all week, now reaching new intensity. What more do we know about where military operations are standing right now?
You know, Tom, yesterday I was talking to Hallie about the announcement of these pauses, these 4-hour pauses, and the White House announcing that. And look, now just 24 hours later, you showed that image of the sky above Gaza City, lit up. We're hearing explosion after explosion. Microphones are picking up automatic weapon fire. It does appear that there is the kind of street combat that you expect with urban warfare. It seems to be continuing right through the night. This is a battle over Gaza City, the largest urban area, if you like, inside of Gaza, a place that the Israelis have described as the Hamas strongholds. So we're not surprised that it's getting as difficult as this, as intense as this. Some people watching will be surprised that after the hopes of yesterday, this is what we are seeing now. And as you mentioned at the top there, it's happening around hospitals. That's inevitable. It is a city. It is an urban environment. But there have been multiple explosions around, and witnesses tell us in those hospitals. And that has got a lot of people very, very worried.
Well, we know, what was it, a couple of weeks ago that we had this case in which the Palestinians claimed that an Israeli bomb or rocket landed on a hospital. That evidence was really contradicted by what the Americans and the Israelis said. In fact, it appeared to have been a Hamas-fired projectile of some sort. Do we know any more about who fired this missile or this projectile tonight? And lastly, can I ask you, are the claims by Hamas about how many people have died within Gaza, are they believable? Are they exaggerated? What's the feeling on the ground?
Well, look, we have to be honest, don't we? There are lots of things we don't know. The latter part of your question, actually, honestly, is very, very difficult to answer. I can give you some facts about the first part of your question. So the Al-Shifa Hospital, which is the biggest hospital in Gaza City, what we're told by witnesses there is there were 2 explosions overnight. Last night, we're past midnight here now. We're talking about the last night. There's fighting again tonight. But last night, 2 explosions. Now, what an Israeli official has told NBC News is that one projectile, it says, according to its analysis, came from a misfired, and they say, a terrorist rocket. Now, we don't know what that means about the second explosion, and that's not the only place where we have seen explosions very close to hospitals. Listen, this is all happening around hospitals. We've seen images of Israeli tanks in the streets from a children's hospital. We've spoken to a doctor tonight at Al-Shifa Hospital. Tom, we did ask him, because there have been claims that there has been a Hamas stronghold at Al-Shifa Hospital. We did ask him whether he has seen Hamas fighters or any other kind of militants there, armed militants. He said no. The Israelis have been adamant in the other direction, but they have also said that they would not target hospitals unless they are fired at from a hospital. We spoke to a doctor there. He said, look, I'm scared, but I have people in ICU here. I can't leave.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's terrifying. Keir, thank you very much. Keir Simmons on the ground. Let's bring in now Aaron McLaughlin, who's got more about this message from the United States that more needs to be done to help keep civilians safe. Aaron, what are you hearing?
Yeah, that's right. Messages from the United States calling for these pauses. The President Biden himself saying that he wants a 3-day plus pause. But what's happening right now is a 4-hour pause that the Israeli military has agreed to do every day, opening up a humanitarian corridor to allow Palestinians, tens of thousands of them, to evacuate from the north, where most of the fighting is concentrated, to the south. Today, they opened up a second humanitarian corridor along the coastline. But I've been speaking to Palestinians who say this is just not enough. I was speaking to a senior Palestinian lawmaker, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who was very critical of the violence that was seen in northern Gaza, in Gaza City, around the hospitals today, calling that bombardment on the part of the Israelis indiscriminate, but also saying that these pauses do absolutely nothing to help the Palestinian people. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I never thought that in the 21st century we will be in such a situation. But the most horrifying thing is the indiscriminate bombardment around the hospitals, on the hospitals, in the hospitals. It's just totally indiscriminate, and there is no way when you bombard a hospital that you can check who's going to be killed or who's going to die or not die. But the talk about pauses instead of a real and true ceasefire means nothing. It means that we're telling people you have 4 hours and after that we will kill you.
So Dr. Barghouti there basically just echoing what we're hearing from a UN official, that these pauses are callous and cruel. We're also hearing from the humanitarian community, the IRC, the head of the IRC, David Miliband, saying that at minimum what is necessary here is a 5-day pause to allow for Palestinians to get to safer ground, but also to allow more humanitarian aid in. The Israeli military, of course, reiterating its statement, its position that there will be no ceasefire until all of the hostages are released.
Can I ask you, Aaron, about the situation in the south of Gaza? That, of course, is where the Israelis have been telling Palestinians to go, to leave the northern part of Gaza, go down to the south. They've created these corridors for free passage. Even some of those have been bombed, though. What's the update from the south side, the south end of Gaza?
Well, this is, by all accounts, Tom, a desperate situation. Keep in mind that even before the war, Gaza was one of the most congested places on earth. Now, suddenly, this mass movement of tens of thousands of Palestinians from the north to the south with very little infrastructure there to be able to accommodate them. I was talking to Dr. Barghouti about that. He has medical teams on the ground in Gaza. He's in regular contact with Palestinians there. He said there's just simply nowhere for them to stay. The schools which were being used as refuges are completely full. There's not enough sanitation, not enough bathrooms. Homes are completely full. People just don't know where to go, and there's very little in the way of places they can go, considering the Rafah crossing is closed to Palestinians. They're only allowing foreign nationals and the very injured out to Egypt. So the Palestinians that are there are stuck with very little in the way of food, medicine, and water. Tom.
Aaron, thank you very much. Aaron McLaughlin, who's on the ground as well for us. Okay, well, this may sound like yet another rinse and repeat story, but it is happening again. We are now exactly 1 week to go until the complete government shutdown again, and House Republicans are gearing up to release their plan to avoid one. A senior GOP aide tells NBC News that Speaker Mike Johnson will release the plan to keep the government open and funded tomorrow, with the most likely plan really being about a short-term bill that kicks the can down the road into next month or maybe next year. And, of course, it all sets up a potential vote on Tuesday, meaning that if that passes, the Senate will have just a couple of days to take its own vote on the bill and stop key government services from going dark. If a shutdown does happen, you will feel the effects. We all will, with impacts on everything from air travel to the economy, public health services, food and housing assistance, air traffic controllers, and also you can imagine how this impacts the lower income. Let's bring in now our team covering all of this. NBC's Julie Sirkin is on Capitol Hill right now, and business and data reporter Brian Chung is here as well. Julie, can we start with you? What's the plan? What is the most likely plan of action that we should expect tomorrow from the Speaker? And can he count on his full conference to support a short-term bill? That's what got the last Speaker in trouble.
That's exactly right. We're having a Groundhog Day all over again because Speaker Mike Johnson is really in the same position that his predecessor, ousted House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, was in about a month and a half ago. Can he count on his full conference for support? That really depends on which plan he puts forward. There's talk of a so-called laddered CR, a staggered CR with these different funding deadlines. I believe we have a graphic we could put up there where you could see all of the options here. That option would certainly be a logistical nightmare for Democrats. You can imagine it'll be more complicated for them to continuously be operating under this shutdown threat. Those deadlines could be January and February. There's another option here, though, which hardline conservatives are less pleased about. That would be a short-term clean CR, so to speak, through January. Remember, that's something Johnson himself had floated initially when he got the Speaker gavel in the first place just a couple of weeks ago. That's also an option that the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, told me would be the only option Democrats would accept, this clean CR without any spending cuts. Then you move to option number 3, negotiate on a Senate-passed bill. I'm told the Senate is going to move on their own bill no matter what, and they already begun work on that yesterday with the Majority Leader Chuck Schumer kicking off that process on the floor. So a lot of options on the table, but no concrete plan just yet.
So I've got to ask you just about the drama that we've seen within the GOP, because when Kevin McCarthy, the previous speaker, when he went for that short-term spending bill, that plan, that cost him the job, right? He had a rebellion from the hard right, from the MAGA Tea Party company there on Capitol Hill, and they said, we will never again support any effort to do a short-term bill. Here we are again. We're back with a speaker who's talking about a short-term bill. Will he have his conference in line?
Well, it's interesting. It seems to be a little bit of a different situation for Johnson and McCarthy. I talked to some Republicans who said maybe Johnson is still in his honeymoon period. We're willing to give him some credit, some trust here for him to figure out his way. Of course, a first test being keeping the lights on in this place, and the government is certainly a big one and a high bar. But hardliners said they're willing to maybe consider a short-term government funding bill now with Johnson in the chair. They're more so poised to support that first bill that I told you about with those staggered deadlines. But certainly Johnson here saying there's no appetite for a shutdown. He's not scared quite yet. It's the moderates in this case, the moderate Republicans, that he's going to have to worry about.
Julie, thank you. Julie Sirkin on Capitol Hill. Friday night. Go home already, Julie. Thank you very much. We appreciate your expertise. All right. Break the economic impact. That's the issue here. We want to see what the impact is. So Brian Chung has been following all of that. He's our data and business reporter. I call him a guru, all things business and data.
Thank you.
So break this down for us. What would the impact be?
Well, we can look to the last time a government shut down, which was in 2019. In that particular shutdown, we saw 300,000 federal employees get furloughed, a lot of them concentrated, as you can understand, in the D.C. area. Now, for what it's worth, even those that are not deemed non-essential that would be furloughed might still have to go to the office but not get their paychecks. And in the last shutdown, some people said, well, I just might not show up at all. There were no shows, and it only takes a few traffic controllers to really kind of hobble the TSA and security lines at the airports across this country. So that could very much be a big deal. For what's worth, on the economic side, we saw $11 billion lost, $3 billion of which was permanently lost. And then markets didn't appear to care that much, Tom. They went up 10% during the last shutdown.
I'll tell you, yesterday we had a hearing on Capitol Hill. We heard from the FAA and the TSA and the union all saying, if you guys go into a shutdown again, you're going to cause pandemonium for air travelers. And that is what caused the last shutdown to finally break the politicians. Especially the White House under Trump. They finally came back at that point and ended the shutdown. So we're back here doing this again. And it's hard to believe that and by the way, these people are not making a lot of money, right?
Not
a TSA
right.
officer is not making a lot of money. You can't expect him or her to go weeks on end without a paycheck.
Yep. And that then leads to some pressure, as you mentioned, that ended up breaking the last shutdown. Now, does that repeat itself? We'll have to see.
All right, listen, we have some news breaking right now. Just in the last few minutes, the White House is responding after Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit outlook from stable to negative, calling it yet another consequence of congressional Republican extremism and dysfunction. That from Moody's. What's the impact going to be?
Yeah, well, this just crossing the wires. For what's worth, Moody's is one of three major credit ratings agencies. It's the only one of the three that still has a perfect rating on the United States. And today's announcement doesn't change that. What they said is they have a negative outlook now on the U.S. sovereign debt rating, which means that they could perhaps downgrade it in the future. They were citing, quote, continued political polarization. The White House this evening firing back with Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, saying it's the GOP that's, quote, holding the nation's full faith and credit hostage, obviously referring to the debacle over this short-term handling of the government shutdown. But again, Wall Street is watching this very, very closely, underscored by the action that we've seen in just the last hour.
Well, and that Moody's language does appear to blame the Republican Party and the Republicans on Capitol Hill. All right. Brian, thank you. Brian Chung, as always, is on the story. We're also learning today that a high-stakes meeting is set for next week between President Biden and China's President Xi Jinping. White House officials say they will discuss Taiwan, election interference, and the war in the Middle East, in addition to managing competition and limiting conflict. The meeting comes a year after the two leaders last met in person in Bali. The two have not spoken since. In that time, tensions have flared over things including the Chinese spy balloon. Remember that earlier this year? And other issues of alleged Chinese espionage and U.S. restrictions on technology exports to China. Hallie Rafa is joining us now. Hallie, how crucial is this meeting right now at this time with the Chinese government, given the relationship, Chinese-Russian relationship? We have Ukraine, the conflict there, and the Middle East. There's an awful lot boiling right now on the stove.
Yeah, Tom, the stakes of this meeting really can't be underscored enough, especially you laid out in the intro there, all of the things that have happened over the last year since the last time Presidents Xi and Biden met in person, all of the world events that involved or impacted the U.S. and China, the world's two largest economies. And White House officials say first and foremost, what's going to be top of this seemingly endless agenda during this meeting on Wednesday is maintaining open lines of communication between the U.S. and China. They say that the Chinese spy balloon incident that you mentioned really underscored the importance of keeping those lines open, especially in an effort to prevent escalating tensions and aggression. That's something that has really worried U.S. officials over the last few months, as we have seen escalating tensions by China on U.S. military assets and avoiding some near disasters in those cases. And we also expect them to talk about the Chinese production of fentanyl. Of course, we know that's led to a catastrophic crisis here in the U.S. They'll talk about the trade of technological goods. As you mentioned, they'll also talk about the Israel-Hamas war, the war between Ukraine and Russia. And notably, Tom, we expect them to also talk about Taiwan. Of course, the U.S. supporting Taiwan militarily, China claiming Taiwan as its own. Officials say we could expect President Xi to expect a pledge from President Biden to not meddle in the independence efforts by Taiwan. And we can expect the president to ask of President Xi a pledge to not meddle in Taiwan, as well as the U.S. elections in 2024, Tom.
A lot on the plate, and there has been this effort to restore some diplomacy between Chinese and U.S. counterparts. What role has that played in getting this meeting to where they're going to have an actual summit? And then I got to ask you, because people have been asking me all week, believe it or not, could President Biden bring up the pandas, allowing pandas to come back to U.S. zoos?
Oh, that would be, I'm sure everyone in D.C. would be very grateful if he did bring that up during that meeting. They're very sorely missed already. Yeah. But I think as far as how those diplomatic efforts have helped really set the stage for this, you can tell just by the amount of investments and time that has been spent working on this meeting behind the scenes and publicly. We know that several members of Biden's cabinet, Treasury Secretary, Commerce Secretary, the Secretary of State, have all gone to Beijing in recent months trying to lay the groundwork for this. We know National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as well as President Biden himself, have sat down with the Chinese foreign minister to talk about the expectations for this. And just today, we know that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen met with the vice premier of China in San Francisco, talking about the expectations and the cooperation before this meeting expected on Wednesday, Tom.
Hallie, thank you very much. Hallie Rafa, who's at the White House. We have some breaking news coming up. Well, we have just now learned FBI agents seized from New York City's mayor this week. That's later in our 5 things. Plus, how a pure form of ecstasy could potentially help veterans with PTSD. Stay with us. We're coming back. We're back. Did you hear about this? A legal win for Prince Harry, with a UK judge ruling his lawsuit against the publisher of the Daily Mail, the newspaper, it can go to trial. Harry isn't alone in his fight against the paper. Elton John and some other big names are also part of the lawsuit. They say the Daily Mail hacked phones and committed other serious privacy violations. They say privacy over there, going back 30 years. The publisher had asked for the case to be thrown out. NBC legal analyst Danny Savalos joins me now. Danny, walk us through what the plaintiffs are saying here. Prince Harry and the others are asking from the court.
Essentially, this was really about, and again, the difference between the legal system, although we borrowed our legal system from the English, at the same time, there are procedural differences, and I'm hardly either a barrister or a solicitor. But as I understand it, this is basically similar to what we have in the United States, where the plaintiffs in this case were alleging that they had been hacked. But the defendants were essentially saying, hey, you're out of time. The statute of limitations has passed. But it sounds as if England has the same rule we have here, which is in some circumstance, if you can prove that the harm couldn't have been discovered until a certain point or date, then you can essentially toll or pause the statute of limitations until you reasonably should have discovered the harm.
You know, it's funny because I was living in the UK when we had the big scandal involving Prince Charles and his phone being hacked. And one newspaper literally went under because it had been hacking telephones. I mean, something like that would just should never happen in American journalism. But over in the UK, the publisher seems to really be saying that even if these things did happen, as you suggested, it's outside of a 6-year window to face legal action.
Sure, and I would argue that a 6-year window when it comes to torts or civil wrongs committed by one against another, 6 years is actually a very permissive statute of limitations. For example, here in New York State, it's 3 years if you do harm to someone, generally speaking. And if you cross the river in New Jersey or even Pennsylvania, it's just 2 years. So actually 6 years relatively permissive as far as statutes of limitations go. And, look, England is not that different from the United States. If you're a defendant facing a major lawsuit in either country and you can wiggle out of it on a statute of limitations argument, you're going to wiggle out of it, or at least your insurance carrier is going to crowbar you into doing so.
Danny, I'm always just astonished, though, at the difference in journalistic ethics in the UK versus in the United States. I mean, a big publisher in the United States would never allow, as certainly NBC News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, would never allow any of the reporters to tap into somebody's cell phone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, culturally, at least journalists appear to be, at least at some places, not every place in the UK, but it seems that allegedly there are some shenanigans going on when it comes to allegedly trying to wiretap some phones or tap some phones. Look, the bottom line is, if these are aberrant incidents, then, lawsuits, legal action should take them down in the UK just as much as they should here in the States.
Well, it's worked in the past. Danny, thank you. Danny Savalos, common law in the UK and in the United States, so he has some expertise across both countries. Danny, thank you very much. Let's get you over now to the 5 things, our team's things that you should know about tonight. Number 1, NBC News has just learned that the FBI seized phones from New York City Mayor Eric Adams this week amid an ongoing investigation into his campaign fundraising. Remember, last week, federal agents searched the home of his chief fundraiser. Adams' campaign lawyer says the mayor has not been accused of any wrongdoing and is cooperating with federal investigators. Number 2, a park in Washington, D.C. is closed after World War I-era munitions were found there. Park officials say the munitions were first discovered in April, but they're just closing the park now because there might be more original munitions that aren't hazardous. That, according to Army experts, it is not clear how long the park will be closed. Number 3, WWE founder Vince McMahon is going to sell over 8 million of his shares in WWE's parent company, TKO. That, according to a press release, it's worth about $700 million. The move, a possible indicator that McMahon is trying to get out of the family wrestling biz. Number 4, ever wonder who that is on the cover of Led Zeppelin's 4th studio album? Well, a researcher just discovered it's a Victorian-era photo of a man who made thatched roofs for cottages in England. It's a great photo, by the way. His name was Lot Long. He was 69 at the time. That, according to the researcher. The photo will be on display at the Wilshire Museum, where it'll be sure to get a whole lot of love. See what we did there? Whole lot of love. Number 5, the results we've all been waiting for. Here are the 4 new members of the National Toy Hall of Fame. The Fisher-Price Corn Popper, baseball cards, Cabbage Patch Kids, and Nerf toys. Dozens of experts picked the winners, except for the Corn Popper, which was chosen by the public. I don't even know what that is, the Corn Popper. When we come back, health authorities in Puerto Rico say flu is an epidemic there right now. How many cases they're seeing? That's coming up later in our local. Breaking news coming in just now. Tonight, the Big Ten Conference, just in the last few hours, announcing that it is going to sideline the University of Michigan's head football coach from games through the rest of this season over that sign-stealing scandal we've been talking about for a while. Basically, Michigan is accused of sending a scout to opponents' games to figure out and record their in-game signals. Now, the NCAA doesn't outlaw sign stealing, but it does have rules against in-person scouting of opponents and using electronic equipment to steal those signs. That, according to a statement from the ESPN from Michigan, the university says now it's going to try to get a court order to stop the Big Ten from punishing its head coach like this. Well, the reason this is such a big deal is because playoffs are less than 2 months away, and Michigan is a major power. It's ranked 3rd in the country, has got a huge game tomorrow, and there's also, as you would expect, big money involved. NBC's Noah Pransky is on the story. Noah, all right, not everybody follows college sports like this, and so walk us through what has been happening here and why it matters.
All right, so simply put, we now have discipline for one of the best teams in the country for allegedly cheating. Let me walk you through the timeline of how we got here over the last 3.5 weeks or so. So October 17th, the NCAA receives evidence reportedly from a private firm and secretly launches an investigation. But word gets out, head coach Jim Harbaugh at Michigan releases a statement, basically exonerates himself, says he's innocent, knows nothing about what's going on. This is key here because the next day they suspend the assistant coach at the center of the scandal. A few days later, though, the Washington Post details this extensive operation in Michigan. This is not a small-time thing. They basically indicate this is a large illicit video operation. And the rest of the Big Ten and the rest of the college football world says there is no way the head coach couldn't have known. Fast forward 2 days ago, Michigan demands due process. And then we get to today where the Big Ten suspends the coach only from games, not from practice, not from planning, but from game day sidelines. And Michigan just puts out a statement saying they're going to ask for an injunction to block this from going into effect on Saturday when Michigan plays Penn State. You're now caught up to date. The big question, what happens next? Well, the NCAA is still investigating. They could take more significant action, as could the college football playoff, which essentially operates independently from the NCAA. Tom?
Harbaugh has been so controversial for so long. We mentioned that there's a lot of money involved, depending on how the Big Ten's decision plays out here. And this decision is coming right before Michigan plays Penn State tomorrow, right? So talk about what's at stake there and how much this really affects things. If he can't be on the sidelines during the games, but he can be coaching the team during the week, it's not like he's being pulled away from the team.
Yeah, I think the reaction is going to be from the sports world. This is a slap on the wrist. But again, the question is whether the Big Ten could have done more. Michigan pushed back immediately and said the bylaws of the conference don't even allow them to do this until there's due process. They say it's an NCAA issue. But we talk about what's on the line. Yes, the football playoffs, there's so much on the line there because let's talk about the money, Tom. $6 million to the conference for each team selected to the playoffs. So you could maybe understand why the Big Ten didn't want to stop the team from competing or do something more substantial, because the Big Ten right now doesn't just have Michigan, but they also have Ohio State, and they could have two teams in the college football semifinals here. A lot of money on the line, but also moving forward, we got a few weeks left in the season here, and there's still time for the NCAA to take action as well. This is a to be continued, Tom.
And you know the thing about Michigan, people either love Michigan or love to hate Michigan, right?
Just like Ohio State.
I know, it's true. People are on, one extreme or the other. Noah, thank you very much. Sure. We appreciate it. All right, NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day, and because it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them, our bureau teams have done it for you and for me. This is what they say is going down right now in their regions. We call this segment The Local. From our Southern Bureau, police in South Carolina say 2 rogue daycare workers have been arrested for allegedly encouraging kids to push and hit each other. All the children are okay, and the daycare says both workers have been fired. They're facing multiple child abuse and neglect charges. From our Western Bureau, the mayor of Anchorage, Alaska, has declared a snow emergency after a storm dumped more than 2 feet of snow on the area in 2 days. He says the conditions are causing a threat to public safety. The move allows the city to get more resources to clear the snow. Look at that. It's only November. All right, out of our Southern Bureau, Puerto Rico health authorities declaring a flu epidemic after 42 people died since July. Health officials on the island say there have been almost 26,000 cases of influenza on that beautiful island, with about 900 ending up in the hospital. About half of the cases have been reported in young people, ages 0 to 19. The son of a former top Hollywood agent is under arrest for murder in Southern California in connection with the headless torso found in a dumpster in Encino. Their investigation leads them to the house of the suspect, a 35-year-old man, and while the remains have not yet been identified, the suspect's wife and in-laws are missing. You see them right there. We want to bring in NBC's Miguel Almaguer. Miguel, talk to us about what we know about where this investigation stands right now, and these people are still missing.
That's right, Tom. Los Angeles detectives retrieved the unidentifiable body from a dumpster. The torso was found by a homeless man who says the body was in a trash bag. After that gruesome discovery, police say they watched surveillance video, which led them to the home of Samuel Haskell, who's the son of a famous Hollywood agent and producer. Tonight, Haskell's wife, May, and her parents, who also lived in that home, are missing. Arrested on suspicion of murder, Haskell's being held on $2 million bail. He's expected in court Monday. Police say inside the home they found evidence consistent with a, quote, killing and dismemberment. Haskell and his wife are also the parents of 3 small children who tonight are safe and staying with family, but some troubling allegations here, Tom.
All right, Miguel, thank you. Miguel Almaguer in L.A. for us. Coming up, an Army veteran's new mission, how he's using his inventions to help make life better for millions of people who need wheelchairs. We've got that story after the break. Well, as we have reported, there is an awful lot of terror and fear gripping the Middle East in the weeks after Hamas's October 7th attack in Israel. Arab and Jewish communities, especially on edge as the war rages on. But in one small corner of Israel, a group of Jews and Arabs are teaming up with a message, trying to protect each other and reject the violence that they're all seeing. What are they doing to put their words into action? Well, they're accompanying people who are scared to travel to other neighborhoods alone, sending supplies to displaced Israeli communities and more. The group, a minority in a land where fighting feels pervasive and violent and horrific, but they are trying to change the narrative. NBC's Hallie has the story.
You could call them peace warriors on the streets of the ancient city of Jaffa in Israel. Jews and Arabs working together to protect each other, putting up posters promoting peace and a helpline for those reporting incitement or violence, says Amir Badran.
Explain to me what you do on the streets when you have these actions.
So we put posters and we give them some stickers and flyers and so on, speaking about no racism, no violence. Jaffa is for all of us, Jews and Arabs together.
What would you say to someone who say, you're just an idealist, you don't understand the practicalities of what needs to be done?
If I'm speaking this language of hope and together, I know what I'm speaking about because I'm the one who's living it.
The group has around 3,000 members. A few are out tonight. With the anger and pain unleashed by the Hamas attacks, no one is saying this will be a quick fix. But for Jean-Marc Lilling, it's a start.
This land can hold more than one narrative, more than one religious, national narrative. And I think we have to get beyond the justified fear of each other.
A radical idea in a bitterly divided land.
And Hala is joining us now. You know, Hala, I think that last sentence you just said is so critical. A radical idea that we can get along. Because there are people on both sides who think that they've got to wipe out everybody on the other side, right? All Palestinians have got to leave, or all Jews have got to leave. And I understand that some of this movement that you're talking about started back in 2021 in Jaffa when the city descended into rioting and looting and arson after violence in Jerusalem and rocket fire with Gaza, right? So how did that kind of set the stage for this?
Yes, exactly. And Jaffa is interesting because it's one of the mixed cities. In Israel, it's a little under 40% Arab. And it's a city that prides itself in many ways on being mixed, on intercommunal entente. But in 2021, as you mentioned, there were riots. The Arabs of Jaffa have complained in the past that they're being pushed out. So in some ways, it's a microcosm of the wider tension across the country. And these people on the streets, it's a small group. I mean, we've got to put it in context. We're talking here a few dozen on the streets of Jaffa, but we wanted to follow them because their narrative, their message is not one that's making headlines very often these days. And you do find people who are saying the solution to what's going on across this country is not military, it is political, and it's one where the two communities have to find a way to live together. Tom.
Well, as they say, from their lips to God's ears. Hala, thank you very much for that great reporting. We appreciate it. Now, for the first time in over 20 years, a new treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder could be approved by the FDA sometime over the next year. But it may not be what you expect. That's because it's a pure form of the party drug ecstasy called MDMA. After years of research, scientists are ready to submit their findings to the FDA. They say just 3 doses combined with therapy lowered the symptoms for more than 86% of people, giving new hope to a lot of veterans who suffer from that condition. NBC's Harry Smith joins me now. Harry, talk about what you heard from the vet you talked to about his experience with this treatment.
Absolutely fascinating, Tom. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about this. PTSD is really such a significant problem for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. A lot of them find normal treatment is not effective. A lot of times they go to the VA and they get antidepressants. A lot of the stuff that standard operating stuff just doesn't work for them. This MDMA, along with psychotherapy, has had really, really dramatic effects in these trials that have been going on now for a couple of years. And one of the veteran we talked to, Scott Ostrom, told us in uncertain terms that this really, in fact, changed his life. This is him describing a little bit about what it was like when he had the MDMA actually in his system and how he responded to it.
All of that gratitude turned inward, and I started to feel grateful for myself. And all those walls that I had built up over the years just dissolved. And I got to tell myself, like, you are a good person. Like, you are doing the right thing. You are doing the best you can.
This guy's a Marine's Marine. 12 years after he left the battlefield, he was haunted by nightmares. He was hyper vigilant every day during the day. He used to carry a weapon with him. Since his treatment, the psychotherapy with the MDMA, on his own, he's quit using alcohol, doesn't use drugs anymore. He says, I asked him, did MDMA save your life? He said, it changed my life.
You know, this really reminds me, you and I have both done stories about psilocybin and how people claim that, psychedelic, what we now know are psychedelic mushrooms and the like, how they have helped clear the cobwebs, they say, in their brain and allowed positive energy to come in. And so what is the FDA saying about this as a treatment for PTSD? Could it be approved?
Well, it's interesting because they fast-tracked the study, all right, which is a big deal. These Schedule I drugs like what we're talking about with psilocybin in the last couple of years, they really think there's promise in that. So with a fast track, that's why should all this information from the study get transmitted to the FDA by the end of the year, in theory, this could be approved within 6 months afterwards.
Harry, thank you. That's interesting reporting. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Also on this Veterans Day, as we remember and we salute members of the military who have made huge sacrifices, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice in service to the country, I caught up with one of those vets who lost the use of his legs more than 40 years ago. He just received one of our nation's highest honors for helping to improve millions of lives worldwide.
First things they really teach is if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you.
Don't let the wheelchair fool you.
The wheelchair was not in the plans. Not for me and probably not for the Army, I'm sure.
Army veteran Rory Cooper, Dr. Rory Cooper, hasn't slowed down since he lost the use of his legs 43 years ago. His inventions, not his wheelchair, have taken him to a bronze medal in the Paralympics and all the way to the White House.
He moves us closer to being a nation that is accessible for all.
Where he was just awarded the National Innovation.
You've changed the way we look at the world, and you made it better.
Making life better for anyone who relies on a wheelchair to get through life. I can't appreciate what the challenge is if I don't live your life. It required somebody who lives your life and has your engineering expertise to make this fix.
Yeah, well, you have to recognize the problem, right? And then you live the problem.
Living and working the problem, Rory became a biomedical engineer and inventor. He holds more than 20 U.S. patents through the Human Engineering Research Lab he founded with the VA and the University of Pittsburgh, designing new wheelchairs to drop the weight from 80 pounds down to 18. Then a revolutionary, now widely used design, an ergonomic push rim on the wheel.
And so you can, grab it easier without less effort on your forearms or your elbow or your shoulder.
So you don't get carpal tunnel or something like that?
Yeah, carpal tunnel, elbow tendonitis, rotator cuff injuries.
He then turned his attention to the joystick on motorized wheelchairs, making it programmable and touch sensitive.
So if you can only use your thumb, you might want it very stiff but very sensitive. And if you're very strong, you may want some compliance to give you some resistance.
Today, his designs are used around the world, helping millions who depend on wheelchairs, like Army Sergeant David Gifford, paralyzed after he was hit by a car while riding his motorcycle.
Making them lighter, making them faster, changing the wheel sizes, things that cut down on resistance and allows you to go even faster.
For his decades of service, Dr. Cooper was among 16 inventors newly inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame.
What I find unique about all of the members of the Hall of Fame is that they're dedicated to serving others.
Part of a trailblazing group that included Kathleen Carrico and Drew Weissman, the scientists who developed mRNA vaccines against COVID-19, and joining giants of innovation, including Thomas Edison, George Washington Carver, and Steve Jobs. I heard you say, I am a runner. Not I was. You said, I am a runner. It's in your blood, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I think I'm competitive. And I'm an engineer, and by definition, I call myself a problem solver, and inventors are all problem solvers.
A problem solver always looking for the next project.
I take it as an obligation or responsibility, right, to just train the next generation and keep moving forward, right? There's still a lot of problems that we can address and to solve.
Yeah, what a pleasure to meet Dr. Cooper. He told me he had learned the meaning of teamwork in the military and that you never leave anybody behind. And that has been at the core of his life's mission. Every day looking for new ways to improve the lives of the disabled, especially vets. Still to come from us right now, women dominating the Grammy nominations today and pop culture overall this year. The artists making moves and making history after the break. Okay, you know this already. It's a woman's world, and a lot of us are just living in it, right? The 2024 Grammy nominations, out just a few hours ago, are making that very, very clear. Women or women's groups taking 7 out of the 8 spots in the big 3 categories: Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year. SZA leads the pack with a total of 9 nominations. Taylor Swift becomes the first person in Grammy history to get 7 nominations in the Song of the Year category. My nephew, he loves that, absolutely loves it. Forget and watch her. It's all about the anti-hero song for her big hit. And these just wrapping up a year of women dominating the entertainment business. Right now, Britney Spears' memoir is the country's top-selling book for the 2nd week in a row. People have bought literally hundreds of thousands of copies. Meanwhile, Swift and Beyonce's tours sold millions of dollars in tickets. We want to bring in NBC Entertainment reporter Chloe Malas. Chloe, talk us through these nominations. Anything surprising about how unprecedented it is for female artists to totally dominate this list right now?
First of all, Tom, girl power, baby, right? I mean, that is what you're seeing right now. I just want to bring up our graphic of the different categories that were nominated today, the Grammy nominations. I mean, look at all of the women in the Song of the Year category, Record of the Year category, Album of the Year category. You obviously have Miley Cyrus, Olivia Rodrigo, Taylor Swift, Billie Eilish, and all of these incredible artists. But this is not really anything new. So I'm going to hit you guys with some facts. The first Grammy Awards in 1958, guess who was the first Grammy winner to win multiple awards in that year? It was Ella Fitzgerald, right? So we can take it all the way back then. But really, you are seeing women not only get nominated in these categories and win and dominate the music industry, they're also owning their own music. They're starting their own record labels. Taylor Swift re-recording her masters after hers were originally sold bought and then sold by Scooter Braun. And so I think that it's just more about women owning their own voice and also really being the ones to make the money behind it.
Listen, I have girls, so I'm a big believer in girl power. We've talked about concert films, but now we have Britney Spears' book. Everybody's talking about this book. Why is it such a hot seller?
Well, I mean, first of all, she had that controversial conservatorship. And this was the first time that everybody was hearing about her struggles in her own words. But celebrity memoirs, these are nothing new. These have been around for decades. And it's an opportunity for celebrities to own their own narrative. I mean, you even see Prince Harry, and he has sold millions of copies of Spare and spilling the juicy details of what it's been like to grow up in the royal family. And I think that, people like to know that stars, they're just like us and they have struggles and they have issues with their families and that life is not perfect with money and fame. I mean, you saw it with Will Smith and you saw it with Jada Pinkett Smith's memoir that just came out a couple weeks ago.
Matthew Perry as well. Chloe, thank you. Great reporting. Thank you for that. That's a wrap for this hour, but coverage on News Now picks up right now. Wherever you are, good evening, good afternoon. We come on the air with the latest brutal fighting happening within Gaza City. New video, new pictures coming in showing us the intense war between Israel and Hamas. What we know about how one of the biggest hospitals in the region was hit by strikes. Today, we are live on the ground. And we're back in countdown mode to yet another complete government shutdown again. What lawmakers are trying to do to avoid that, how you might be affected if this doesn't work out. Plus, the son of a former top Hollywood agent under arrest, suspected of murder. What we know about how police are making the connection between him and a woman's torso found in a dumpster in L.A. Then a legal win for Prince Harry out in the UK, why a judge is letting a case involving him and some other big-name celebs go to trial over a newspaper's alleged privacy violations that go back decades. Plus, the Big Ten just announcing it is sidelining Michigan's head coach from upcoming games over that sign-stealing scandal that involves the university's highly ranked football team. How Michigan is responding to that tonight. Good day, I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie, and we start again with that intense situation on the ground in Gaza City. Israeli forces pushing deeper into the densely populated area now. Take a look at these images. Fierce aerial fighting, flares, a lot of fire on the Israeli-Gaza border in just the last few hours. Palestinians in Gaza City are now talking about a violent evening, saying Israel is launching airstrikes near many hospitals, including at the largest in the region where some strikes hit earlier today. Tens of thousands of people are sheltering inside the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. That word from the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. What exactly happened or who is responsible for these blasts around the hospital that you're seeing right there? It's not clear. Israel says it did not target the hospital. The IDF says the strike resulted from a projectile launched by a militant group inside Gaza. Israel claims it was a misfire. A Palestinian general secretary accuses Israel of bombing northern Gaza indiscriminately. All this as the United States says far too many Palestinian civilians have been caught in the crossfire and killed. And Israel, of course, is all in on this retaliatory effort to wipe Hamas out of Gaza for that terror attack by Hamas back on October 7th, in which hundreds of people were murdered in Israel, 1,400 in all, more than 200 kidnapped and held hostage. We have the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, right here.
Far too many have suffered these past weeks. There is more that can and should be done to minimize harm to Palestinian civilians.
Well, the health ministry inside Gaza, run by Hamas, says more than 10,000 people are believed to be dead. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin is in Jerusalem. We start, though, with Keir Simmons on the ground in Tel Aviv. Keir, we talked about an hour ago. What more do we know about this bombing inside Gaza, right around this hospital? Who might be responsible?
Yeah, well, we're watching a continued bombing tonight around Gaza. The sky is lit up again and again over Gaza City. I think that soundbite you played of Secretary Blinken is notable, actually, Tom. I think there is signs that the US and the West are becoming more frustrated with these kinds of images that you're looking at right now. We're hearing, too, about France's President Macron telling in another interview, telling the BBC there's no justification for the bombing and saying Israel must stop killing babies and women in Gaza. So that's incendiary language from the leader of France. What we actually have seen in the past 24 hours are a number of explosions around hospitals, around Gaza City. It is urban warfare there now, Tom, and of course there are hospitals there. You mentioned an Israeli official has told NBC News that in one case at the Al-Shifa hospital, that was an explosion that they believe was caused by a errant weapon from the Palestinian side, if you like, but that doesn't explain the other explosions. And I think we're going to have to see what happens there. There have been proposed suggestions by the Israelis. The Al-Shifa hospital, for example, was being used as a Hamas kind of base in the past, but that wouldn't justify targeting a hospital like that, particularly with civilians inside, of course. So there is a lot happening. It is nighttime. It's the fog of war, if you like, but many questions also being asked.
And to that end, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today said that a ceasefire is off the table, and he's clarifying what Israel's goals are in Gaza after the war. Can you walk us through his comments and how they seem to have shifted a little bit over the last couple of days?
There has been a little bit of a shift. We have seen, we heard yesterday the White House say that Israel had agreed to these 4-hour pauses every day. What we've seen today, though, are 2 humanitarian corridors, as the Israelis call them, enabling, as the Israelis would see it, as Palestinians to flee the terrible scenes that you're seeing there. Though I've got to say, NBC team meeting some of those Palestinians, hearing from them that they feel forced to flee, that it was so violent that they needed to leave their homes, not voluntarily, but because they had no choice. So even the question of what these pauses are and what they're being used for is controversial. There doesn't appear to yet be a plan, or at least it's under discussion, for pauses that would allow aid to come in, and then pauses that would allow hostages out again. That is, it seems to be not resolved. I am hearing from a source with knowledge of the talks that the talks in the past over hostages have stalled over numbers of hostages. And, Tom, I'm hearing that is still a sticking point, that there is progress.
And there's still more than 240 hostages that are believed to be in those tunnels. Keir, thank you very much. Keir Simmons on the ground in Israel. Aaron, can we go to you now for more on this message from the United States? The U.S. saying that more needs to be done to protect civilians, Palestinians.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. At the United States' behest, the Israeli military has formalized these daily pauses to facilitate that humanitarian corridor that Keir was just talking about, to evacuate Palestinians from the north to the south, the north, of course, being where most of the fighting is expected to be concentrated. Scenes that we're watching play out, in fact, today. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have heeded these warnings, fleeing the violence. The Israeli military opening up a second humanitarian corridor today. But speaking to Palestinian officials here, and they say this is just not enough. Earlier today, I was speaking to Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. He is a senior lawmaker, senior Palestinian lawmaker in the West Bank. He has medical teams on the ground in Gaza, is in regular contact with both the hospitals in Gaza City as well as hospital officials down south. He described really a desperate situation, alleging that the bombardment that we have been watching play out in Gaza City throughout the day amounts to indiscriminate bombardment on the part of the Israelis. And he also said that these humanitarian pauses do little to help the Palestinian people. Take a listen to what he had to say earlier today.
I never thought that in the 21st century we will be in such a situation. But the most horrifying thing is the indiscriminate bombardment around the hospitals, on the hospitals, in the hospitals. It's just totally indiscriminate. And there is no way when you bombard a hospital that you can check who's going to be killed or who's going to to die or not die. But the talk about pauses instead of a real and true ceasefire means nothing. It means that we're telling people you have 4 hours and after that we will kill you.
And we've been hearing from the humanitarian community sort of echoing what he's saying. We've heard from David Miliband, the head of the IRC, say that at a bare minimum, what is needed here is a 5-day pause to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. That would be enough time at the minimum to allow more humanitarian aid in, to allow Palestinians to get to places of safety. It's worth pointing out, you know, before this war, Gaza was one of the most congested places on earth, and essentially what we're watching is tens of thousands of Palestinians leave their homes, leave their possessions, walk down south with very little in the way of infrastructure in the south to accommodate them. I was talking to Dr. Barghouti about that. He said there's very little in the way of food, very little in the way of medicine, water, and shelter. He said the schools are full, the houses are full. There's just nowhere for all of these people to go, which is in part why we're hearing from the humanitarian community, and now even U.S. officials say that more needs to be done. Tom.
Aaron, thank you. Aaron McLaughlin on the ground in Israel for us. Breaking news just in the last hour, the White House is responding after the United States saw the outlook on its credit rating change from stable to negative by Moody's. Moody's says the change is, quote, another consequence of congressional. Let's back that up. I want to make sure that we got this right. The White House is saying, rather, let me back up on that. The White House is, in fact, saying that Moody's decision to change the U.S. outlook is yet another consequence of congressional Republican extremism and dysfunction. Moody's cites a number of recent actions by congressional Republicans repeatedly taking us to the brink of a government shutdown. All right, now that is happening just as we are about 1 week away until we're going to go through this all again, the possibility of a government shutdown. House Republicans are gearing up to release their plan to avoid a shutdown. A senior GOP aide tells NBC News that Speaker Mike Johnson will release the plan to keep the government open and funded tomorrow, with the most likely option being a short-term bill that kicks the can down the road into the next month or maybe next year. It all sets up a potential vote on Tuesday, meaning if it passes, the Senate will have just a couple of days to take its own vote on the bill and stop key government services from going dark. If a shutdown does happen, we all will feel the effects, with impacts on everything from air travel to the economy, public health services, and food and housing assistance for lower-income people. Let's bring in now our team covering all of this. NBC's Julie Sirkin is on Capitol Hill, and business and data reporter Brian Chung is at his big board to break it all down on the economic side. Julie, let's start with you. What are you hearing? What's the most likely plan of action that we should expect tomorrow from the Speaker? And can he count on his full conference to support a short-term bill? That's what got the last Speaker in trouble.
That's exactly right. We're having a Groundhog Day all over again because Speaker Mike Johnson is really in the same position that his predecessor, ousted House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, was in about a month and a half ago. Can he count on his full conference for support? That really depends on which plan he puts forward. There's talk of a so-called laddered CR, a staggered CR with these different funding deadlines. I believe we have a graphic we could put up there where you could see all of the options here. That option would certainly be a logistical nightmare for Democrats. You can imagine it'll be more complicated for them to continuously be operating under this shutdown threat. Those deadlines could be January and February. There's another option here, though, which hardline conservatives are less pleased about. That would be a short-term clean CR, so to speak, through January. Remember, that's something Johnson himself had floated initially when he got the Speaker gavel in the first place just a couple of weeks ago. That's also an option that the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, told me would be the only option Democrats would accept, this clean CR without any spending cuts. Then you move to option number 3, negotiate on a Senate-passed bill. I'm told the Senate is going to move on their own bill no matter what, and they already begun work on that yesterday with the Majority Leader Chuck Schumer kicking off that process on the floor. So a lot of options on the table, but no concrete plan just yet.
So I've got to ask you just about the drama that we've seen within the GOP, because when Kevin McCarthy, the previous speaker, when he went for that short-term spending bill, that plan, that cost him the job, right? He had a rebellion from the hard right, from the mega Tea Party company there on Capitol Hill, and they said, we will never again support any effort to do a short-term bill. Here we are again. We're back with a speaker who's talking about a short-term bill. Will he have his conference in line?
Well, it's interesting. It seems to be a little bit of a different situation for Johnson and McCarthy. I talked to some Republicans who said maybe Johnson is still in his honeymoon period. We're willing to give him some credit, some trust here for him to figure out his way. Of course, first test being keeping the lights on in this place, and the government is certainly a big one and a high bar. But hardliners said they're willing to maybe consider a short-term government funding bill now with Johnson in the chair. They're more so poised to support that first bill that I told you about with those staggered deadlines. But certainly Johnson here saying there's no appetite for a shutdown. He's not scared quite yet. It's the moderates in this case, the moderate Republicans, that he's going to have to worry about.
Julie, thank you. Julie Sirkin on Capitol Hill. Friday night. Go home already, Julie. Thank you very much. We appreciate your expertise. All right, let's bring in now NBC's Brian Chung, who covers business and data. And Brian, before a shutdown even happens, we are already seeing the economic impact with that outlook change by Moody's. What kind of a ripple effect might we see?
Yeah, well, one response to that might be, well, could that increase borrowing costs? Because if there is the concern from the credit ratings agencies, the experts, that maybe the United States government isn't going to be as capable as it once was of paying its bills on time and in full, that can make the borrowing costs of issuing those so-called U.S. treasuries more expensive. Now, you mentioned what the White House had said in response, and yes, we've heard the political rhetoric from the White House pointing the finger at the GOP because they've been the ones that have been having issues of avoiding this government shutdown. But we're also hearing from the Treasury with the Deputy Secretary saying that, quote, the American economy remains strong and Treasury securities are the world's preeminent safe and liquid assets. So they hope that maybe this will just be a blip. Again, just to reiterate, Moody's did not downgrade the United States. They still have the perfect AAA rating on them, but they have a negative outlook, which suggests maybe in the future they could.
And a credit downgrade would be only one part of the economic impact, right? Where else will Americans see the economic impact if we go down into the shutdown? And no, this is not a repeat of your DVR stuck in repeat mode.
Yeah, let's talk about exactly what happened in 2019 when we talk about what happened to the economy. 300,000 federal employees were furloughed at the time if they were deemed not necessary. Now, even those that were deemed essential to the government had to go to work without paychecks on the promise that we'll get you once we get out to the other side and the government reopens. But for that reason, even essential services at the TSA and the IRS, for example, you had some workers say, if I'm not going to get paid, then I'm not going to show up in the first place. And that could lead to big paralysis at the major airports around the country. It only takes a few air traffic controllers to leave the job to really bring things to a standstill. Now, when it comes to the numbers of the 2019 shutdown, we saw $11 billion lost, $3 billion of which the Congressional Budget Office says was lost permanently. But for what it's worth, it might not do that much damage to your 401k if we go into one, because markets, Tom, over that period went up 10% in 2019. So a lot to digest there.
We just had a warning yesterday from the chief of the NTSB and the Air Traffic Controllers Union and the FAA rep on Capitol Hill saying, listen, we don't have enough controllers as it is. We are down 1,000 to 2,500, depending on which numbers you believe. Everybody agrees we are way, way, way short on air traffic controllers. And now we're going into a situation where we, yet again, may ask them to work for free. They may eventually get paid on the backside if everything works out. But again, going into a job and you could go weeks without a paycheck, and then what? Then you don't necessarily have enough money in the bank to make your mortgage. Not to mention TSA officers who don't make much money. I got to say, this is one outrage. I think it doesn't matter which party you belong to. This is outrageous that anybody who works for the government, allegedly the most solvent government in the world, has to go through this.
Yeah, and that's something that credit ratings agencies are saying. This is a process that's really just unnecessary, and that's what makes this so frustrating. But to your point, when it comes to the airports, for example, you look at the New York area airports, again, it doesn't take a lot for LaGuardia, for example, to really get choked up. These are real-time implications, especially, Tom, during the peak holiday travel season. The last thing people want to deal with beyond the stress of already having to travel for Thanksgiving is the government holding you up even further.
And guess what we heard yesterday on Capitol Hill? Democrats and Republicans saying, oh, I hope this doesn't impact my holiday travel plans. maybe that will be the motivation.
We'll see.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend, buddy. All right. We are learning today that a high-stakes meeting is set for next week between President Biden and China's President Xi Jinping. White House officials say they are discussing Taiwan. They will discuss Taiwan, election interference, and the war in the Middle East, in addition to managing competition and limiting conflict. The meeting comes a year after the two leaders last met in person in Bali. The two have since not spoken. In that time, tensions have flared. You know what the issues have been, right? The Chinese spy balloon, remember that from earlier in the year? And other issues of Chinese espionage and U.S. restrictions on technology exports to China. Hallie Rafa is joining us now. Hallie, how crucial is this meeting right now, given the moment, given the U.S.-Chinese relationship, Chinese-Russian relations, the conflicts in Ukraine, and also in the Middle East?
Yeah, Tom, well, the stakes of this meeting really cannot be underscored enough, especially when you think of all that's happened across the world that impacted or involved these two countries, the U.S. and China, the world's two largest economies, over the last year, this last year since these two presidents, Presidents Biden and Xi, last met in person. And the list of agenda items for this meeting is just seemingly endless. White House officials say a huge focus of this meeting is going to be on maintaining open lines of communication. They say that the Chinese spy balloon incident that you mentioned really underscored the importance of keeping those lines open, especially militarily, as we have seen escalating tensions between China and the U.S. military in recent months. Chinese threats resulting in near collisions, near accidents on U.S. military assets. And we also expect these two to talk about trade, specifically the trade of technology between the U.S. and China, China's production of fentanyl that, of course, we know has led to a catastrophic crisis here in the U.S. that is still worsening. As you mentioned, we expect them to talk about Taiwan, China's claim of Taiwan as its own territory, the U.S.'s military support of Taiwan. Officials say we could expect President Xi to expect a pledge from President Biden to not interfere in Taiwan's independence efforts. And we could expect President Biden to expect a pledge from Xi to not meddle in not just Taiwan's elections next year, but also the U.S. 2024 elections. And so we expect the stakes of this meeting, of course, because of all of these global issues, to be incredibly high stakes, Tom.
And, you know, we have come awfully close to real confrontation with Chinese fighter jets coming to within feet of U.S. fighter jets, right? Thankfully, so far, there's been no disaster associated with that. Listen, I got to ask you, though, about the other high-profile issue this last week, and it may sound trivial, but it's not to a lot of Americans, those Chinese pandas going back to China. And yes, that was part of the agreement, the initial agreement. And yet, boy, what an opportunity for China to really create goodwill with the American people, with the pandas in the United States. And now we only have 4 left nationwide, and those 4 are also supposed to go back from the Atlanta Zoo.
Absolutely, Tom. And we know that deal for the U.S. to have these Chinese panda was a result of diplomacy, years of diplomacy between the U.S. and China. Right now, U.S. officials aren't saying whether there are expectations or plans for talks about that diplomacy to be reinstated as a result of this meeting on the West Coast on Wednesday. But surely that's something to look out for, if that could potentially be something that happens in the future, Tom.
Well, what could we swap them? Maybe a golden retriever or something? I'm not quite sure, but we'll find something. Hallie, thank you very much. Hallie Rafa, we appreciate it. Coming up from us, Iceland is on high alert after more than 1,000 earthquakes were recorded within hours. What the country is now saying about the threat of a volcanic eruption there. Plus, new details in a court case involving the football player who inspired the movie The Blind Side. That's coming up in our 5 Things to Watch. Well, guess what? There's been a legal win for Prince Harry, with a UK judge ruling that his lawsuit against the publisher of the Daily Mail newspaper can go to trial. Harry isn't alone in his fight against the paper. Elton John and some other big names are part of that lawsuit as well. They say the Daily Mail hacked phones and committed serious other privacy violations. They say privacy going back 30 years. The publisher had asked for the case to be thrown out. NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos joins me now. Danny, walk us through what the plaintiffs are saying here. Prince Harry and the others are asking from the court.
Essentially, this was really about, and again, the difference between the legal system, although we borrowed our legal system from the English, at the same time, there are procedural differences, and I'm hardly either a barrister or a solicitor. But as I understand it, this is basically similar to what we have in the United States, where the plaintiffs in this case were alleging that they had been hacked. But the defendants were essentially saying, hey, you're out of time. The statute of limitations has passed. But it sounds as if England has the same rule we have here, which is in some circumstance, if you can prove that the harm couldn't have been discovered until a certain point or date, then you can essentially toll or pause the statute of limitations until you reasonably should have discovered the harm.
You know, it's funny because I was living in the UK when we had the big scandal involving Prince Charles and his phone being hacked. And one newspaper literally went under because it had been hacking telephones. I mean, something like that would just should never happen in American journalism. But over in the UK, the publisher seems to really be saying that even if these things did happen, as you suggested, it's outside of a 6-year window to face legal action.
Sure, and I would argue that a 6-year window when it comes to torts or civil wrongs committed by one against another, 6 years is actually a very permissive statute of limitations. For example, here in New York State, it's 3 years if you do harm to someone, generally speaking. And if you cross the river in New Jersey or even Pennsylvania, it's just 2 years. So actually 6 years, relatively permissive as far as statutes of limitations go. And, you know, look, England is not that different from the United States. If you're a defendant facing a major lawsuit in either country and you can wiggle out of it on a statute of limitations argument, you're going to wiggle out of it, or at least your insurance carrier is going to crowbar you into doing so.
You know, Danny, I'm always just astonished, though, at the difference in journalistic ethics in the UK versus in the United States. I mean, a big publisher in the United States would never allow, as certainly NBC News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, would never allow any of the reporters to tap into somebody's cell phone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, culturally, at least journalists appear to be, at least at some places, not every place in the UK, but it seems that allegedly there are some shenanigans going on when it comes to allegedly trying to wiretap some phones or tap some phones. Look, the bottom line is, you know, if these are aberrant incidents, then, you know, lawsuits, legal action should take them down in the UK just as much as they should here in the States.
Well, it's worked in the past. Danny, thank you. Danny Ceballos. Common law in the UK and in the United States, so he has some expertise across both countries. Danny, thank you very much. We want to get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, NBC News has learned that the FBI has seized phones from New York City Mayor Eric Adams. It happened this week. That's amid an investigation into his campaign fundraising. Remember, last week, federal agents searched the home of his chief fundraiser. Adams' campaign lawyer says the mayor has not been accused of wrongdoing and is cooperating with federal investigators. Number 2, in new court docs, the Toohey family says former NHL NFL star Michael Orr was paid almost $140,000 in proceeds for the book The Blind Side and the film of the same name. Orr has said he made no money off the film and alleged that the Tooheys had been profiting off him for years after tricking him into a conservatorship. The family denies all of that. A judge ended the conservatorship in September after Orr petitioned. No comment yet from his reps. Number 3, there's apparently a movie about Elon Musk in the works. Independent film company A24 is behind it, with Oscar nominee Darren Aronofsky set to direct. It's not yet known who's going to play Musk in the film or when it might be coming out. And number 4, ever wonder who that is on the cover of Led Zeppelin's 4th studio album? It's a classic. Well, the researcher just discovered it's a Victorian-era photo of a man who made thatched roofs for cottages in England. His name was Lot Long. Sounds like a rock star to me. And he was 69 at the time, according to the researcher. The photo will be on display at the Wilshire Museum, where it'll be sure to get a whole lot of love. That's a Zeppelin song. Number 5, check out this giant mayo jar in front of Merriam-Webster's headquarters in Massachusetts. What's it doing there? Well, Kraft Real Mayo sent the surprise delivery, basically in an attempt to make the word moist Webster's word of the year. And no, the jar is not actually filled with mayonnaise. It's an amazing effort. We wish them luck. I don't know. That's not what comes to mind when I think of moist. When we come back, the University of Michigan's head football coach sidelined today for the rest of the season over that sign-stealing scandal. How the school is planning to fight back. Plus, scientists in Indonesia say they have rediscovered a long-lost species. That's coming up in The Global. Yeah, it's a busy Friday. More breaking news. The Big Ten Conference just in the last few hours announcing it is going to sideline the University of Michigan's head football coach from games for the rest of the season over a sign-stealing scandal. Basically, Michigan is accused of sending a scout to opponents' games to figure out and record their in-game signals. The NCAA does not allow sign stealing, but it does have rules against in-person scouting of opponents and using electronic equipment to steal that. In a new statement, the university says it is going to try to get a court order to stop the Big Ten from punishing its head coach like this. The reason this is such a big deal is because playoffs are less than 2 months away, and Michigan, as you know, is a major power player. It is ranked 3rd in the country. It has got a huge game tomorrow with Penn State, and there's a lot of money involved. Big money. Noah Pransky joins me now. So, Noah, not all of us are big college sports fans following the ins and outs of Michigan. So tell us exactly what is going on. Walk it through us with us.
Yeah, so there's often, suspensions in college football, college sports, but they usually have to do with violations of other NCAA policies. We don't usually see discipline involving cheating. So let me back up a little bit, tell you the timeline of how we got here. This is all really the last 3 or 4 weeks. October 17th, the NCAA gets this evidence handed to them from an outside firm, and they launch an investigation into Michigan football. 2 days later, head coach Jim Harbaugh issues a statement where he says he knows nothing about any cheating scheme, any scandal. He has nothing to do with it. And this is key because as we go forward, it was only 1 day later they suspend their assistant coach, kind of point the finger at him. But then later, 5 days later, Washington Post just details this expansive operation that Michigan apparently had, one that basically their fellow teams in the Big Ten say it's impossible to have done this without the coach knowing. And it details what looks like an illegal cheating scheme. So November 8th, just before this announcement comes out today, Michigan demands due process. They say the Big Ten, you don't even have it in your bylaws to do anything before the NCAA does. But then today, Big Ten suspends coach from the sideline of the remaining games this season. And what we know moving forward is it's NCAA's ball next. We'll see what they end up doing with this team.
Yeah, but we're walking a fine line here, aren't we? I mean, the NCAA does not outlaw sign stealing, but it does have rules against in-person scouting of opponents' sign usage and electronic equipment to steal signs. And we've got Penn State coming up tomorrow. Let's talk about that game. You see the team arriving for the airport, I understand, a little bit earlier.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh showed up on the tarmac in Pennsylvania. He's ready to coach. And Michigan says they had a statement just within the last hour or so. They say, we're going to challenge this. We're going to go to court, ask for an injunction to try and get our coach on the sidelines tomorrow. Big Ten says you're not going to do that. So this may play out in court over the next, 16 hours here. But basically, this looks like a slap on the wrist from the Big Ten. There is no big action against the team. That will come either from the NCAA or not at all at this point, Tom.
And Harbaugh is used to being a polarizing figure, so there's a lot to watch here. Noah, thanks. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
You too.
NBC News covers hundreds of international stories each day, and it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them. So we've got an international team that has done it for you and for me. Here are some of the stories they've been keeping an eye on, and we call this segment The Global. Iceland, the iconic Blue Lagoon, closed until next Thursday because of earthquakes in the area. The geothermal pool normally draws a ton of visitors, but authorities shut it down after recording something like 1,400 quakes in just 24 hours, and that put the island on alert for a possible volcanic eruption. In Australia, the government is offering people from the island nation of Tuvalu the chance to escape rising tides and other impacts of climate change. Tuvalu has about 11,000 residents. Australia's plan would initially allow up to 280 people to relocate there each year. In Indonesia, scientists have rediscovered a strange species. Check out the images here. Something called an Attenborough's long-beaked echidna. It's named after British nationalist David Attenborough. The creature has been described as having a hedgehog-like spine and kind of an anteater type of snout. Look at that. There haven't been any recorded sightings since 1961, and now he or she appears to be back. The son of a former top Hollywood agent is under arrest for murder in Southern California in connection with a headless torso found in a dumpster in Encino. Their investigation leading them to the house of a suspect, 35-year-old man. And while the remains have not been identified, the suspect's wife and in-laws are missing. You see them right here. NBC's Miguel Almaguer joins me now. Talk to us about what we know about where this investigation stands right now, and these people are still missing.
That's right, Tom. Los Angeles detectives retrieved the unidentifiable body from a dumpster. The torso was found by a homeless man who says the body was in a trash bag. After that gruesome discovery, police say they watched surveillance video, which led them to the home of Samuel Haskell, who's the son of a famous Hollywood agent and producer. Tonight, Haskell's wife, May, and her parents, who also lived in that home, are missing. Arrested on suspicion of murder, Haskell's being held on $2 million bail. He's expected in court Monday. Police say inside the home they found evidence consistent with a, quote, killing and dismemberment. Haskell and his wife are also the parents of 3 small children who tonight are safe and staying with family, but some troubling allegations here, Tom.
All right, Miguel, thank you. Miguel Almaguer in L.A. for us. Coming up, there may soon be a new FDA-approved treatment for PTSD, but what it is may come as a surprise. We're talking about that coming up next. Well, as we have reported, there is an awful lot of terror and fear gripping the Middle East in the weeks after Hamas's October 7th attack in Israel. Arab and Jewish communities, especially on edge as the war rages on. But in one small corner of Israel, a group of Jews and Arabs are teaming up with a message, trying to protect each other and reject the violence that they're all seeing. What are they doing to put their words into action? Well, they're accompanying people who are scared to travel to other neighborhoods alone, sending supplies to displaced Israeli communities and more. The group, a minority in a land where fighting feels pervasive and violent and horrific, but they are trying to change the narrative. NBC's Hallie has the story.
You could call them peace warriors on the streets of the ancient city of Jaffa in Israel. Jews and Arabs working together to protect each other, putting up posters promoting peace and a helpline for those reporting incitement or violence, says Amir Badran.
Explain to me what you do on the streets when you have these actions.
So we put posters and we give them some stickers and flyers and so on, speaking about no racism, no violence. Jaffa is for all of us, Jews and Arabs together.
What would you say to someone who say, you're just an idealist, you don't understand the practicalities of what needs to be done?
If I'm speaking this language of hope and together, I know what I'm speaking about because I'm the one who's living it.
The group has around 3,000 members. A few are out tonight. With the anger and pain unleashed by the Hamas attacks, no one is saying this will be a quick fix. But for Jean-Marc Lilling, it's a start.
This land can hold more than one narrative, more than one religious, national narrative. And I think we have to get beyond the justified fear of each other.
A radical idea in a bitterly divided land.
and Hallie is joining us now. You know, Hallie, I think that last sentence you just said is so critical. A radical idea that we can get along. Because there are people on both sides who think that they've got to wipe out everybody on the other side, right? All Palestinians have got to leave, or all Jews have got to leave. And I understand that some of this movement that you're talking about started back in 2021 in Jaffa, when the city descended into rioting and looting and arson after violence in Jerusalem and rocket fire with Gaza, right? So how did that kind of set the stage for this?
Yes, exactly. And Jaffa is interesting because it's one of the mixed cities in Israel. It's a little under 40% Arab, and it's a city that prides itself in many ways on being mixed, on intercommunal entente. But in 2021, as you mentioned, there were riots. The Arabs of Jaffa have complained in the past that they're being pushed out. So in some ways, it's a microcosm of the wider tension across the country. And these people on the streets, it's a small group. I mean, we've got to put it in context. We're talking here a few dozen on the streets of Jaffa, but we wanted to follow them because their narrative, their message is not one that's making headlines very often these days. And you do find people who are saying the solution to what's going on across this country is not military, it is political. It's one where the two communities have to find a way to live together. Tom.
Well, as they say, from their lips to God's ears. Hallie, thank you very much for that great reporting. We appreciate it. Now, for the first time in over 20 years, a new treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder could be approved by the FDA sometime over the next year. But it may not be what you expect. That's because it's a pure form of the party drug ecstasy called MDMA. After years of research, scientists are ready to submit their findings to the FDA. They say just 3 doses combined with therapy lowered the symptoms for more than 86% of people, giving new hope to a lot of veterans who suffer from that condition. NBC's Harry Smith joins me now. Harry, talk about what you heard from the vet you talked to about his experience with this treatment.
Absolutely fascinating, Tom. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about this. PTSD is really such a significant problem for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. A lot of them find normal treatment is not effective. A lot of times they go to the VA and they get antidepressants. A lot of the stuff that standard operating stuff just doesn't work for them. This MDMA, along with psychotherapy, has had really, really dramatic effects in these trials that have been going on now for a couple of years. And one of the veteran we talked to, Scott Ostrom, told us in uncertain terms that this really, in fact, changed his life. This is him describing a little bit about what it was like when he had the MDMA actually in his system and how he responded to it.
All of that gratitude turned inward, and I started to feel grateful for myself. And all those walls that I had built up over the years just dissolved. And I got to tell myself, like, you are a good person. Like, you are doing the right thing. You are doing the best you can.
This guy's a Marines Marine. 12 years after he left the battlefield, he was haunted by nightmares. He was hyper vigilant every day during the day. He used to carry a weapon with him. Since his treatment, the psychotherapy with the MDMA, on his own, he's quit using alcohol, doesn't use drugs anymore. He says, that I asked him, did MDMA save your life? He said, it changed my life.
You know, this really reminds me, you and I have both done stories about psilocybin and how people claim that, you know, psychedelic, what we now know are psychedelic mushrooms and the like, how they have helped clear the cobwebs, they say, in their brain and allowed positive energy to come in. And so what is the FDA saying about this as a treatment for PTSD? Could it be approved?
Well, it's interesting because they fast-tracked the study, all right, which is a big deal. These Schedule I drugs like what we're talking about with psilocybin in the last couple of years, they really think there's promise in that. So with a fast track, that's why should all this information from the study get transmitted to the FDA by the end of the year, in theory, this could be approved within 6 months afterwards.
Harry, thank you. That's interesting reporting. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Also on this Veterans Day, as we remember and we salute members of the military who have made huge sacrifices, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice in service to the country, I caught up with one of those vets who lost the use of his legs more than 40 years ago. He just received one of our nation's highest honors for helping to improve millions of lives worldwide.
First things they really teach is if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you.
Don't let the wheelchair fool you.
Wheelchair was not in the plans. Not for me and probably not for the Army, I'm sure.
Army veteran Rory Cooper, Dr. Rory Cooper, hasn't slowed down since he lost the use of his legs 43 years ago. His inventions, not his wheelchair, have taken him to a bronze medal in the Paralympics and all the way to the White House.
He moves us closer to being a nation that is accessible for all.
Where he was just awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation.
You've changed the way we look at the world, and you made it better.
Making life better for anyone who relies on a wheelchair to get through life. I can't appreciate what the challenge is if I don't live your life. It required somebody who lives your life and has your engineering expertise to make this fix.
Yeah, well, you have to recognize the problem, right? And then you live the problem.
Living and working the problem, Rory became a biomedical engineer and inventor. He holds more than 20 U.S. patents through the Human Engineering Research Lab he founded with the VA and the University of Pittsburgh, designing new wheelchairs to drop the weight from 80 pounds down to 18. Then a revolutionary, now widely used design, an ergonomic push rim on the wheel.
And so you can, grab it easier without less effort on your forearms or your elbow or your shoulder.
So you don't get carpal tunnel or something like that?
Yeah, carpal tunnel, elbow tendonitis, rotator cuff injuries.
He then turned his attention to the joystick on motorized wheelchairs, making it programmable and touch sensitive.
So if you can only use your thumb, you might want it very stiff but very sensitive. And if you're very strong, you may want some compliance to give you some resistance.
Today, his designs are used around the world, helping millions who depend on wheelchairs, like Army Sergeant David Gifford, paralyzed after he was hit by a car while riding his motorcycle.
Making them lighter, making them faster, changing the wheel sizes, things that cut down on resistance and allows you to go even faster.
For his decades of service, Dr. Cooper was among 16 inventors newly inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame.
What I find unique about all of the members of the Hall of Fame is that they're dedicated to serving others.
Part of a trailblazing group that included Katlin Carrico and Drew Weissman, the scientists who developed mRNA vaccines against COVID-19, and joining giants of innovation, including Thomas Edison, George Washington Carver, and Steve Jobs. I heard you say, I am a runner. Not I was. You said, I am a runner. It's in your blood, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I think I'm competitive. And I'm an engineer, and by definition, I call myself a problem solver, and inventors are all problem solvers.
A problem solver always looking for the next project.
I take it as an obligation or responsibility, right, to just train the next generation and keep moving forward, right? There's still a lot of problems that we can address and to solve.
Yeah, what a pleasure to meet Dr. Cooper. He told me he had learned the meaning of teamwork in the military and that you never leave anybody behind. And that has been at the core of his life's mission. Every day looking for new ways to improve the lives of the disabled, especially vets. Still to come from us right now, women dominating the Grammy nominations today and pop culture overall this year. The artists making moves and making history after the break. Okay, you know this already. It's a woman's world and a lot of us are just living in it, right? The 2024 Grammy nominations, out just a few hours ago, are making that very, very clear. Women or women's groups taking 7 out of the 8 spots in the big 3 categories: Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year. SZA leads the pack with a total of 9 nominations. Taylor Swift becomes the first person in Grammy history to get 7 nominations in the Song of the Year category. My nephew, he loves that, absolutely loves it. Forget and watch her. It's all about the anti-hero song for her big hit. And these just wrapping up a year of women dominating the entertainment business. Right now, Britney Spears' memoir is the country's top-selling book for the 2nd week in a row. People have bought literally hundreds of thousands of copies. Meanwhile, Swift and Beyonce's tours sold millions of dollars in tickets. We want to bring in NBC entertainment reporter Chloe Melas. Chloe, talk us through these nominations. Anything surprising about how unprecedented it is for female artists to totally dominate this list right now?
First of all, Tom, girl power, baby, right? I mean, that is what you're seeing right now. I just want to bring up our graphic of the different categories that were nominated today, the Grammy nominations. I mean, look at all of the women in the Song of the Year category, Record of the Year category, Album of the Year category. You know, you obviously have Miley Cyrus, Olivia Rodrigo, Taylor Swift, Billie Eilish, and all of these incredible artists. But this is not really anything new. So I'm going to hit you guys with some facts. The first Grammy Awards in 1958, guess who was the first Grammy winner to win multiple awards? In that year, it was Ella Fitzgerald, right? So we can take it all the way back then. But really, you are seeing women not only get nominated in these categories and win and dominate the music industry, they're also owning their own music. They're starting their own record labels. Taylor Swift re-recording her masters after hers were originally sold bought and then sold by Scooter Braun. And so I think that it's just more about women owning their own voice and also really being the ones to make the money behind it.
Listen, I have girls, so I'm a big believer in girl power. We've talked about concert films, but now we have Britney Spears' book. Everybody's talking about this book. Why is it such a hot seller?
Well, I mean, first of all, she had that controversial conservatorship. And this was the first time that everybody was hearing about her struggles in her own words. But celebrity memoirs, these are nothing new. You know, these have been around for decades, and it's an opportunity for celebrities to own their own narrative. I mean, you even see Prince Harry, and he has sold millions of copies of Spare and spilling the juicy details of what it's been like to grow up in the royal family. And I think that, you know, people like to know that stars, they're just like us, and they have struggles and they have issues with their families, and that life is not perfect with money and fame. I mean, you saw it with Will Smith, and you saw it with Jada Pinkett Smith's memoir that just came out a couple weeks ago.
Matthew Perry as well. Chloe, thank you. Great reporting. Thank you for that. That's a wrap for this hour, but coverage on News Now picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.